In this video, I'm going to quickly kind of show you my pipeline for creating these tentacles for this Kraken cannon I'm making. So see, I had to import in my Kraken mesh that I'm currently working on. Let me see. Oh. I'm going to pull that in over here. Okay, so oh, actually, I clicked the wrong one. So let's go ahead and import it in. Import FBX. I'm going to import my Kraken body decimated. So this is something actually I've done, and I did a little bit of ZBrush. I started to kind of lay out my Kraken body just a little bit, and I was realizing that you know, my tentacles weren't feeling terribly. You know, they weren't feeling very uniform when it came to tapering. Now I understand that, obviously, you know, working in ZBrush is organic, but in this case I wasn't getting the results I really liked. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to create some tentacles based off this, and then I'm going to put back into ZBrush and add in the detail from there. So now I did find a couple pretty interesting tutorials online that I'm actually kind of used to ultimately create the method I'm going to be doing now. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off by adding in I'm actually going to my arm curve here. I want to add in a curve. I'm going to go to path, and so what that's going to do is going to give me this path that will be I think it's about only 5. So I'm going to subdivide that, so I'll get 10 segments now. And what I want to do is I'm going to start to use this to you know, just kind of push it around to create this Kraken arm. So I guess the first one I'll make the one that's kind of on the side. So obviously the Kraken's going to have 8 tentacles or 8 arms, and then this process I'm going to use for this first one will be actually used for all of them as well. And then once I'm finished with the base model, I'm going to then export that out into ZBrush. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start to manipulate these edges by just pushing them around. And it actually might be best to first go to my top view, and I'm just going to be tweaking everything a little bit here and there to kind of ultimately give myself the look that I'm going for, kind of the curvature that I'm looking for. Now this can be, you know, a little weird working when you're seeing like it as a flat line. But I'll go into different views as well to give it more of that kind of organic feel that we're going for. So now I might go to my side view, and I'm going to turn on my proportional editing, which is going to allow me to bring things up, which I might tone that down just a little bit. And I'm going to rotate this just a hair. So I want to start to kind of tweak things a little bit here and there, mess my proportional, or bring my proportional editing down. I'm going to go to global in this case. So yeah, that's really kind of what it is. It's very organic kind of a feel. You know, I'm moving things around based on what kind of feels right for the situation. And now that I have kind of the layout of it, I'm going to start to move around a little more in the 3D view, whereas before I was moving around only in orthographic perspectives. So I might come in here, grab some of this, tweak my proportional editing as I work, for whatever feels kind of right. Maybe I want to twist this a little bit. Right now you won't really be able to see that whole lot until it actually comes into the applying the mesh to it. But we'll move that around. Okay, so let's just, for the sake of time, you know, this is kind of the curve that I want to start with, and I know that I'm going to tweak it a lot more. I mean, it's kind of one of those deals where I could probably mess with this, you know, for hours and still not get perfect. You know, there's always going to be ways I can just manipulate a little bit more. So, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to in this case, I'll just go to my top view, and I have that curve there, right? And I'm going to now go into my open data properties, and that's going to give me a bunch of options. And I can go to my bevel. I'm going to change this to something like 0.1. As you see, the larger the bevel, the larger this kind of sweep, or this modifier is going to add on geometry. So I'm going to make it a little bigger, maybe 0.25. And what I'm looking for is I want to see how big this part here I want it to be. And really, it doesn't have to be anything huge. I mean, this probably worked just fine for what I'm doing, because I will be actually tapering it in just a moment. So if I want more resolution, I can up the resolution. But if I want here's the resolution preview. If I want to bring it really low, let me go ahead and turn on wireframe so you might be able to see. Okay, so here's the edges. I can manipulate that, and obviously the higher resolution, the more edges. Now if I just put 1, then obviously it's going to be very low poly. And I want this to be a little higher because I am taking this into ZBrush, and in ZBrush I will be sculpting high poly on there. So therefore I do want to make sure they have enough geometry to work with. And I think that looks pretty decent. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my top view, and I'm going to actually create what's called a taper profile. So I'm going to add an object. In this case, I'll just add a curve. Bezier is fine. And then I'm just going to move this out here just so I can see it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select my tentacle object, and then go to where it says taper object. And I'm going to click this little eyedrop. And I'm going to select on this Bezier curve. So this Bezier curve, as you can see here, it's just, this profile here is going to be, it's going to follow that profile. Like, so therefore it goes thin, thick, thin. And what we actually want is we want something, a little bit, I guess I can draw here. So we want something a little bit more, starts thick and then goes to thin. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this. I'm going to start to manipulate these. And as you see, as I move this up, the tentacle kind of base gets a little larger. And I'm going to move this up pretty good. Now, I don't want this to be like a wire at the end, so I'm going to move this up as well. But what I do want is I want this to be thick at the base. And I'll tweak this in a moment to get a little more base, or the base actually set inside the Kraken character. And then, of course, we have the end being a little bit more tapered. So if I look at the top, from the top view again, as you see, I can get this, really thick, really thin, and this also can be thicker perhaps. So I think I'm pretty happy with how this looks. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just select this tentacle here, and I'm going to because I made a couple collections. One of my collections I called arm curves. I'm also going to make one that's called arm mesh. I'm going to duplicate this and then move this to my arm mesh collection. And the reason is because I want to be able to actually model on this. So now I can select this, and I'm going to convert this to a mesh. And from here I can tweak this a little bit if I want. Maybe I'll have on my move or my proportional editing. I'm just going to move this, set this right inside here. And when I go to ZBrush, I'll be able to kind of push these together a little better. But for the time being, I'm just going to do this. That looks pretty good. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to create this little, I guess, a claw-like. If you look at octopus, they usually have some kind of a claw, or not I guess octopus don't, but when you look at like a Kraken image, like so, you have this claw look here, and that's what I'm going to go for, something like that. Now I'm not going to put on all of them. I'm just going to put on these back two here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start off by selecting this and putting in a cut here, and then I'm just going to I'm kind of just going winging it right now. I'm going to turn off my proportional editing and start to piece this out a little bit here. Maybe I want to flatten this just a hair, and then I want to start to extrude that out, scale it down a bit. Something like that might be good. And then I'm going to put a cap on this one, so I'm just going to grid fill. That's not too bad. And And then I do want this to be a harder edge right here, so I'm going to go ahead and just bevel that, and then maybe throw in an extra segment there, keep that a nice hard edge. So I think that's pretty decent. Now what I want to do next is I want to have this, if you're looking at your Kraken image, see how it's almost like it's rounded and then it gets almost flat on the bottom. As you see here, it kind of gets flat on the bottom. That's what I'm looking for here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select a couple. Let me see, I'm going to find a couple I want to select here. I think I'll select, well, I guess before I even select, I might need to remove these faces here, because otherwise it's going to go all the way through and select the whole entire ring. And I only want to select the bottom parts. So I'm going to start off by just these two, and I'm going to see how this looks. So I selected two edges here. I'm just going to hit Control Backspace, remove them. And now this gives me a nice flat look, although those aren't quite, well, this is not quite how I want it. So I'm going to actually turn on my proportional editing. I'm going to rotate this so that's on the bottom here. And it looks pretty good there. And look at it, here you go. Which actually brings me to my next point. I could, if I want to rotate these, now is a good time to turn on proportional editing. I can start to rotate this so therefore it's not so uniformed. And it looks a little more organic, like so. Okay, so now I have the bottom, my tentacle, and I want to do one last thing here. I guess two last things. I want to smooth it out, so add a subdivision, add a little more geometry, but also I want to make sure that this edge here is preserved and nice and sharp. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to I'm going to deselect these. Well, I guess I'll select those back. I want to deselect this top one. So I'm going to bevel this here. It doesn't have to be a huge bevel, but a big enough bevel. And I might want to throw in one extra segment to make sure this is nice and sharp. And I'm going to clean up this geometry just by merging last vertice, like so. And then I'm going to take this bit here. That looks pretty decent. I'm going to then fill this properly. That looks pretty good. Now, if I were to go to my subdivision here, it's starting to look decent. I might want to add in one extra one, although I do notice that this is fairly small. So, I don't know, maybe I want to make this a little bigger. So I might grab the bottom here. Oops. I'm going to just grab these, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm not quite like how it looks, so I might go back, and I think I just have to remove one extra one extra edge here. So I might remove this and this edge. Let's see if this is making it significantly more flat, which is I think it'll be fine. So then again, I'm going to go back here and bevel these edges, and something like that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go up to the top, making sure that I get these pieces nice and cleaned up, like so. Okay, and then I want to close this off with the grid. And now I'm going to try again to bevel, or to smooth this out of the subdivision surface. And this looks a little nicer, a little bit more, a little larger on the flat side. Okay, so now if I turn off my wireframe, this tentacle is ready to go into ZBrush now and be sculpted on. Otherwise, you can also sculpt it in this engine here, or in Blender. I personally I have a lot of, I have some preferences to ZBrush, just some extra tools I want to be using. But this is the pipeline that I'm going to be using for creating all my tentacles for this Kraken cannon. You know, the next one I want to do is I'm going to wrap the tentacles around each one of these. I'll have a couple that are wrapping around the bottom here, holding the whole gun together. So, you know, of course, if I want to, I might make this a little bit larger. Perhaps If that just quite wasn't big enough, I can make this a little bigger, like so. Maybe that wasn't quite big enough. I think this is a little better actually. Then I might have to go back in here and move this a little bit closer to the middle and maybe add one extra bit there. So this is the pipeline that I'm going with. You know, I just wanted to kind of show a little bit about the process I'm using. The combination between Blender for more modeling, ZBrush for more the sculpting, and then I'll bring it back into Blender for the Retopo, in which I can then use my mesh that I had here as a good starting point for the Retopo when I come back from 3D or from my sculpting software. In the last video, I showed you my pipeline for creating these kind of base meshes for my tentacles here. And since then, I have used that process to make all of my tentacles. Now, these two larger ones, they are actually just one has been created, and I just mirrored the other one over since I want those to be identical. So, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and select all my tentacles. And my goal right now is to take this mesh here, import it into my sculpting software, and then start to sculpt high poly details onto this. So I selected all those meshes, and we'll go to File, Export, FBX. Now you could also export out as OBJ. I like FBX personally. Now I want to export this out with my Kraken arms, and then I want to make sure to hit Selected Objects because I only want to export what I selected. And I just need to export the mesh. Now, one thing to note is when, and I can turn off my animation there, but when I export this out under geometry, I want this to apply modifiers. If I don't have that checked, then it'll just export out without the modifiers applied. Nice thing about this this toggle, it's going to allow me to keep my modifiers on my base mesh in Blender without actually you know, baking them down. So therefore, when it comes to unwrapping later on, it'll be a little bit easier for me. So what I'm going to do is now export these FBX. It's been exported. Shouldn't take too long. And I'm going to go to ZBrush, which is my organic modeling software. And I'm going to go Z plugin. I want to import what I just exported, which is my Kraken arms. And that's been imported, so I just have to drag it out. Let me see. It's not dragging out for me. There it goes. Okay. So now as you see here, I have all my Kraken arms, just the Kraken. I don't have to worry about the body right now. I'll eventually merge everything together. So I'm just going to show you how I can model just the one first. And then again, this will be the method to take across to all of them. So first thing, if I were to turn on my lines, you see the topology, it's okay, but we actually want a lot finer topology. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my geometry tool. I'm going to divide this maybe 2 times, and I'm going to delete my lower. So you see that's a little finer, it's looking pretty good. So now if I were to pull across, it's looking, you can see better detail. But actually I want to even go a little higher than that even yet. So I'm going to go my diamond mesh, I'm going to move this up to something like 3000 perhaps. Hit Dynamesh. As you see there, we're going to get even better detail. So this is going to allow me now to model very fine detail on here. So if I were to now go in here and use the damn standard, I'm actually going to be using my tablet, so I recommend you do the same. I have a tablet and a macro keyboard that I use when I'm working on this. The macro keyboard just kind of helps me you know, real quickly swap to different buttons, different macros I've signed here. So, but as you see here, if I were to, oops, just gonna do that. If I were to do my damn standard, like how high of detail that looks now. Now, if I were to try to do that in something with a lot less geometry, then it would definitely give me a totally different look. So what I want to do here is I want to isolate this by hitting solo. I just want to focus on just this one tentacle now. And I'm going to worry about the skin detail first. So if I were to go to my light box, go to my alphas, I already have in here a bunch of skin textures that I can choose from. In this case, I want to choose from, I think I want to go from maybe pores 4. So I'm just going to select that. And I should see it pop up over here. But actually before that, I want to go back to my standard brush. So I'm going to close out real quick on my standard brush. And then I want to open my light box and go back to pore 4s. So there it is. Now this is some textures I purchased online. Some skin textures. Now, as you see, as I kind of sculpt across there, oops, let's go ahead and zoom this in just a hair. You can see that I'm getting this skin texture. Now it's looking very repetitive, which is not quite what I want. I want something that's a little bit more organic looking, so I'm going to go to spray. And spray is going to give me a more unique look. Now the problem with spray though is see that wherever I press more, it's going to get a little bit larger. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. And then you turn on, I have a macro here that's going to basically, it came with my skin kit, and it's going to prevent my my skin from bubbling up too much. So it's going to preserve the geometry while also pressing in the high poly detail I'm looking for. So it's pretty simple. You don't need a lot of pressure. You can just kind of run across the outside here. And you might want to adjust your brush size. I'm okay with what I got right now. I'll probably come back through in a little bit, and after I put kind of this base down, I'll come back through and adjust some things. So this part's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. And then you know, I might want to come through here and smoothen out some parts of this. It's totally up to you how you want to do this. Okay, so now I have that. I need to go back down to the kind of the base of my tentacle. I do need to throw a few pores in here. Now what these pores are going to do is just going to break it up for me and make it look a little bit more unique. Okay. So this still looks really smooth and shiny, not quite what I want. In fact, if I were to pull up an image of, let's say, octopus tentacles. Let me go and bring this down. In order to, because this is kind of what I'm basing this off of. Let me go and look at this. No, it's not a good example. See, mostly we're seeing just the suction cup portions. I want to see more of the. Okay, so this looks kind of wrinkly. So maybe I should be going with more wrinkles than anything. Yeah, something maybe I should go with more wrinkles. But there's also a lot of bumps, almost like scaly. It's scaly but slimy at the same time, which is weird. But of course, octopus are kind of weird too. They're very unique creatures. So maybe I might go in here. I might find something more like a reptile. So something like Reptile 2 might be good. Or maybe even something more like turtleneck, perhaps, or let's try turtleneck, see how that looks. Okay, so what I have to do for this is I'm going to switch my drag. And I'm actually going to have to drag out each one of these. So just simple click and drag. Now that's looking kind of cool. Yeah, so I think I'm going to keep that there. I'm going to drag this out the rest of the way. Now this could be very tedious, so now's a good time to find some good music and kind of just zone out. Really, in sculpting in general, can be kind of tedious. But what I'm going to do is I'll speed up the video, and then we will resume once I get this all drug out here. Okay, so now I have all the scales kind of drawn on there. I might actually go in, even if I want to, I could add in some more details. So perhaps I come with my dam standard and I start to kind of sketch in some parts that dip in a little bit here and there. I might want to go back and do that and make this brush a little bit smaller. But also something to notice, when you're working with this organic modeling, keep your intensity low. By keeping the intensity low, it's going to allow you to have a little bit more subtle movements, so it's going to keep it looking more organic. Whereas if you have a really intense moment, it might kind of break that illusion of organic feel. So I'm just coming through here, I'm kind of drawing in some parts I want to be a little bit more sharp. Perhaps, as you see there. Now I'm going to also go in, let's see what other brushes can I use here. I'm going to go my breakup brush. So this is a breakup brush that has a bunch of kind of pre-made alphas, which I can then go in here and carve in. So if I want to carve in like this cut, I can just drag that out like there. Or if I want to maybe put some barnacles on here, I can do that there, put some surface barnacles. There's a number of things I can use here, so maybe some burns. Now I don't really think any of these are quite what I'm looking for right now. I don't know if I could put a scar. I guess I'll put this hard scar there. That looks kind of cool. Oops, let's go and put that back there. So it looks like it kind of got in a fight of some sort. Maybe I want this to even be a little larger. There you go. That looks pretty good. So one thing I do want to use this for is we have up here we have barnacle hollow. And this is actually kind of similar to the suction cup shape that I'm going to be going for. Now the suction cup shape, I'm going to be baking these down because this is a game mesh. So I'm not too concerned about it being massive. And the reason I'm not concerned about being massive is because the bigger the barnacle shape is, the harder it's going to be to bake it down to the flat surface. So I'm more or less just trying to make this a normal map that's going to give the illusion of popping out a little bit. Now when I go to the bottom, I do notice that there are, when I was creating the sculpting the top half, we got some issues here on the bottom with it looking a little bit like this. You might like this look, maybe not. It's totally up to you if you keep it. So I might go through here real quickly and my standard brush. I'm going to turn off this alpha. And then I want to just using my shift select, I'm going to smooth this out just a little bit. Just kind of give a a flatter or a smoother, flatter surface to work on. Not as distracting. There you go. Okay, so that looks a little better. Okay, so do be careful when you do it though. As you can see here, we got that. We got the issue of kind of that getting blurred. So I can do this. I'm gonna go brush, go to auto masking, and I'm gonna turn on the back face mask. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna prevent me from being able to sculpt on items I can't see. I'll draw out these again. There you go. So now we should have a pretty hard look. And the back didn't get that shape as well like it did previously. Okay, so now I'm going back to my light box, or sorry, to my brush, and then here I have my breakup brush, which has my barnacle holes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start off, if I'm looking at my reference, I notice that octopus always have 2 rows, so therefore I need to make, I'm going to start the very base here. I think it'll be fine. Actually, I don't want to quite start at the base. I'm going to start off a little bit higher. So I'm going to just drag these out, and I want these to be pretty much fill the whole entire section there. And I'm just doing 2 rows, the best I can, and it's going to go right to the surface. So as you see there, it sticks right to that surface I'm on, which is pretty nice. So I'm using what's called the drag rec, which allows me to just click and then drag out the shape. I can rotate it based off where the angle of my brush is. So I can make it go different directions, pretty easy. Now there are a few other tools I can use. I can use what is called just the drag dot, which will basically be a predetermined size, and then I'll have to, from there I can just drop where I want. So the drag dot would be something like here, and wherever I put it. Now the problem with drag dot is I'm going to constantly be updating the size, and I really don't want to update my size. I'd rather be able to organically make the size based off what part of the tentacle I'm at. But the problem with drag rect is sometimes I need to come back and redo it. Like that one's a little too close, so I have to come back and redo it just by hitting my undo button. So it's not too hard. But anyways, I'm going to speed this up. What I'm doing is I'm just go ahead and drawing this over 2 rows across the whole entire tentacle. Okay, so as you see, I'm getting a little bit closer to the end here. So I'm going to start to widen my tentacle suction cup count to a little bit more, since I do want this to be able to use the end here. Now, as you notice, they got a little smaller the further, or the closer to the end they got, and so that's pretty typical when you're dealing with something that's tapering down the way this was. Now I do want to just kind of fill this section up with as much suction cups as I possibly can. But also I want it to be like, I don't want it to be like sitting on top of each other. So be careful there. It's kind of finding that fine line between too much. And I might have actually already crossed that fine line, to be honest, but we'll just roll with it. Okay. So now I have this tentacle arm with all my suction cups. I can come back through here now if I want, and maybe I want to do, let's see, Maybe I want to add in some like vein like items. Now I could do that with my clay buildup. I go through here and kind of build up the big muscle in the middle. Now really it's kind of up to your design. You know, might want to look at reference here, as you see right there. The larger it gets, the more detail it takes away from what we had previously drawn in. So maybe this step here might be something that's better off done earlier in the video than like right now. But I can always go back and draw that extra detail in a later time if I want. So I'll come back in here and draw those back in. I can do that as well. Okay, so now we have our tentacle sculpted. I'm going to call this good for now. I mean, there's definitely, you could continue to work on this, but right now I'm pretty satisfied with what I have. I'm not going to go much further than this. Yeah, so the next step is getting it from ZBrush to your texturing software, as well as to your modeling software to retopo it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to plugin, and I want to decimate this. So I actually want to create two exports. I want to export out my tentacle first. I'm just going to use one tentacle. So we'll call this we'll just call this let's see, so something like tentacle 1, or we'll call it tentacle 1 HP for high poly. And so I want to make sure that I save this as its full everything, you know. Now this one in particular is about 500,000 polygons, which is pretty high, but you have to consider we decimated it greatly to get this detail. So what we need to do is, we dynameshed it greatly to get the detail. So what we need to do now is we want to create a lower polygon version that we can then plug into our Blender software that can then handle it a little easier. Because ZBrush specializes in handling millions and millions of polygons, whereas our modeling software such as Blender, Maya, Modo, Max, those do not handle these millions of polygons the same way as ZBrush can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Z plugin, and I would probably want to save another copy. In this case, it's just for a demonstration, so I'm not too concerned. I'm going to go to my decimation master. I want to pre-process current. So what this is preparing my current tool or mesh here to be decimated. So now that I've done that, keep an eye on the active points here. I'm going to now go for my decimation. So you have three options. You can either do percentage decimation. So if you just want to drop it down percentage, if you want to do poly counts, or I'm going to go points. I'm going to say I want 10,000 points. I'm going to hit decimate current. And then just like that, you see my points drops down dramatically. Of course, it looks, oops, let me go ahead and move this around real fast. You can see I lost detail in there. It doesn't look nearly as nice. It still looks pretty decent, but now if I were to show you the wireframe, you can see it's still fairly high, so I might want to go back in here one more time. Z plugin. Let's try to pre-process this one real quick, and then went to decimate one more time. Decimate current. And you can see this is a little bit more in line with what we want. I can still even do one more time perhaps. So let's try this once more and decimate current. There you go. So this is going to give us our main curvature shape without sacrificing, it's going to give us the main shape, but also it's going to keep the big shapes in there. So now I'm going to go into here and export out this selected export, and I'm going to call this, let's see, Tentacle 1. I'm just going to call this decimated. That looks pretty good there. So now this has been decimated. And now in the next video, we're going to go back into our modeling software. We're going to create the low poly version, unwrap it, and then send it to our texture software to combine it with our high poly version. In the last video, we exported out our high poly version of this tentacle in which we sculpted. So now what we're going to do here is we are going to go ahead and import in the decimated version. Now this process is going to be more just to make sure that everything looks correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, Import FBX, and I have the Kraken arm. Let's see, Kraken or Tentacle 1 decimated. I'm going to import this, and you can see it right here. What I'm really doing right here though is I'm making sure that everything looks, everything's fairly close. Now there are some of the tentacles at the bottom are a little bit further away than maybe I would like. But for the most part it looks pretty close here. And if I want to, I could come down here. I'm going to select the arm, and I could potentially go through here and actually, let me go ahead and turn that off. I go through here, I could push these down perhaps, so maybe I'll do something like this. Ooh, maybe not quite that. So I'm just going to select all the way through this arm down to the bottom. I might push this out a little bit here. So push, and I'm going to turn off my, so maybe something like that. And the reason I did this is because I just want to simply make sure that we're as close to the end of these tentacles as possible. Okay. So that looks pretty decent. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my modifier here because I don't think I actually need it anymore, because this is going to be my low poly version. And I just want to make sure that everything, everything is good. So I can probably remove a couple of these edges. Maybe I'll remove these here. That might be good, so I can remove those. And I might be able to remove this edge here and here. What I'm doing now is I'm just removing the edges that I don't think are necessary. Let's try these two. And that looks okay. Okay. So I could keep going through and removing vertices, edges. I think this is actually fairly decent. Let's see. So here we have 800 triangles, which will do decent for what I'm doing. So I'm just going to isolate this. That's a little bit high poly, but it's not too bad, honestly. What I can do too is I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any vertices I can merge together. So merge vertices by distance. There's nothing that's too close, so I'm good there. And now what I want to do is I want to unwrap this. So I'm going to just double click this tentacle and this edge down here, and I want to also connect these two. I think I'll just go ahead and select right here, across, and I'm just going to add a seam there, so mark seam. And now when I go to unwrap this, I can grab this and unwrap it. You'll see there's two parts of the tentacle. I could straighten this out a little bit more, but I think for what we're doing it's fine. So what I'm going to do now is this is ready to go. So let me just go make sure I grab the right one. Actually, I grabbed the wrong one, so let me grab the right one here. So this one's ready to go. I'm going to select this tentacle, and I'm going to go to File, Export FBX, and I'm going to export this tentacle 1. I'm going to call this LP for low poly. Oops, let me go ahead. There you go. And I want it to be selected object and just the mesh. Okay. And now that has been exported out, I'm going to open up my texturing software just so I can show you how to bake it down, or my process of baking it down. Pretty straightforward, really. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that LP I just exported out. So select Tentacle LP. I'm going to create for just the sake of showing you what we can do, I'm going to create a 4K resolution. Now, typically in the game engine, you're going to want to use a small resolution for this, but just for what we're doing right now, you don't need to worry about it. Okay, so now I'm going to go into my bake mesh. I'm going to again put it 4K, and I need to select which low poly or which high poly mesh. So I'm going to go to, so the decimate is the lower of the two. The HP is my highest set. It's one that has 500,000 polygons. And then I'm going to go ahead and start by saying 0.1. I'm going to try to put a larger distance for that. And then anti-aliasing, that's going to kind of smooth out some of those things. I don't have any ID maps, so I'm going to turn off that. And I'm going to try to bake this, and we'll see what we get here. Okay, so now you see, I have my texture baked on there. I can go through here and actually start to custom make a few different changes here. And I can start off by filling in my base layer. Maybe I make this something along the lines of pinkish. I don't know. So, there's a lot of things you can do here. So here's after applying some texture on it. Here's kind of what we can end up with. We have our suction cups on the bottom, a little bit whiter. The top is kind of nasty, gnarly pink look. It's definitely a little bit of a slime. You can go back and change any of these things if you want to have more slime, perhaps. So this here is just kind of again a real world view of what I got. I might do something along the lines of Studio 3. Tends to give me some pretty good light. But yeah, so it's definitely an efficient pipeline. And the fact that I can real quickly model this with my spline tool or my curve tool, sculpt it pretty fast, and then pop it back in there and unwrap and texture it based off of my base mesh. So this is how I made my tentacle, and hopefully you guys got a little bit of insight of how I do this. Now I'll be using this process for all the tentacles in my scene, my Kraken cannon. I'll be using the same process to create all the tentacles, as well as even for the character itself. I'll be starting off with kind of a base, and I go in there, I start sculpting it, bring it back and forth between the sculpting software and my texturing software and my modeling software, and then after I have it happy how I want it to be, I then will move on to my texturing software where I add in all the textures there. Again, the goal for this is to create a game ready asset, so I still have quite optimization I do yet, but this is my pipeline.